Hi, good morning, everybody. So, just to introduce myself, I'm Sumeet, and I run global technology for Solace. So, I'll be taking 15 minutes of your time and share some of my experiences working with banks, with CIOs, CTOs, chief architects in my capacity as a chief technologist for Solace as well. So, and hope to interact with you throughout the day after that. So just to kickstart, I'd very quickly introduce who Solace is. Some of you might know us, we work with some of you, but then quite a few of you might be new to Solace. So we are a Canadian company based out of Ottawa in Canada, and we focus on moving data. So moving all kinds of data, and in modern times, we are calling it more of event-driven architectures, which I'll talk about. Relatively small, very much operating like a startup. About 300 people, lots of patents. So we come from this land of a lot of snow, right? And we've been in India for, I would say, close to 7 years, 6+ years. And we have offices here in Delhi, Mumbai, and Bangalore at the moment. Okay. We also have a booth outside, so if you want to know more, you're more than welcome to join us there. Some of our customers, as I said, you might recognize some names from India, obviously quite a few global names, but about 50% of our business is in banking, financial markets, and insurance sector. And outside of that, Airtel, Reliance, Jio, and NSC, and a few others who I can't talk about publicly, they trust Solace as their core data movement backbone. So we are known for robustness, for speed, for burst handling, just to make data movement better. So with that introduction, I'd like to just address some of the things that Mr. Ramachandran also mentioned. Businesses are transforming, right? So just to take an example of payments, which again, India is leading the way in a huge way. We are a part of that to some extent. So this is how payments used to look like in most of the world like 5 years ago. So very large value, low volume, T+3 settlements, although India has been leading the way in real-time settlements for a long time. But then architectures were service-oriented, very siloed. So a payment system would be a payment system. How much does it relate with a credit initiation system? Frauds are basically, fraud management systems are plugged in to some extent. So it's very broken up as an architecture, right? But then this is changing rapidly, especially with the advent of mobility. So the revolution that India has seen in affordable data on phones and smartphones is unbelievable, like nothing like that in the world, where 1 million customers were added for 6 months in a row by Reliance Jio, and as a result of that, other telcos stepped up their game, and the penetration has been massive, which means that more and more e-payments have started to happen, and the next generation is anyway much more branch lazy and digital friendly, right? So with that, if you look at the architectures in a bank, or for that matter, any enterprise, it tends to be a huge monolith. So it's like this huge mothball, and if you pull one string, it disturbs the entire ecosystem, everything else. I'm sure many of you technologists would relate to this. So how do you actually become ready for these digital disruptive scales when you have an architecture like this, to some extent, at least in a part of the bank, right? So that was a Gartner picture, and we've also seen Gartner and IDC and a bunch of analysts talk about it. So just a little peek into history. So in the past 10 years, this is how technology has been from an integration perspective. So there have been some API initiatives, some middleware initiatives, and cloud initiatives for iPaaS and integration, right? So if we move into the past couple of years, what is happening, and looking into the future a little bit. So API management is becoming more and more mainstream. We have event brokering. Again, you can look at various analyst reports, and they've started to talk about event brokering as a mechanism for you to become real time. And again, going to the cloud is an interesting option. The picture at the bottom is from Gartner, which I'll just explain. And here are some of the statements that analysts are making, where they are saying that this concept called event mesh, especially for large distributed systems, would become a mechanism to move your data in a smooth manner. Right? So I'll just tie this to payments and banking as to what that means. And interactions will be more and more asynchronous, much more message oriented, because that's how the world is. Events are happening, we react to events, right? As I said, this is a Gartner picture, the hybrid integration platform that Gartner has been talking about based on their research with the likes of banks represented here. And event brokering has been called out all over the place by Gartner. And other than that, there are APIs and integration platforms as a service, right? So as you untangle that mothball to deliver agility, these are basically the tools that you would need. You can pick your favorite vendor, okay? So a little bit more about Solace and a little bit more about learning from architectures who've already been doing this. So if you research foreign exchange, I'm sure you all have expertise there. FX or equities trading, they have always been real time, they've always been event driven from a trading perspective. Settlement may be after the fact, but the trading systems have been high volume, very event driven in nature. So the know-how that we are talking about comes from that world. About, I would say, 30 to 50% of the world's foreign exchange touches Solace in some way or the other. So we're just applying those architectural concepts to the broader BFSI architecture sets, because the challenges have started to become similar, the scale has started to become similar. So if you look at it as an example, so we just heard about NPAs, we've also heard about payments, and this is a regulation from 2013 from RBI, more around SMS notifications. So just picking one little example, a simple enough example from the industry to convey the message of event-driven, right? So SMS must be sent, SMS should be used for fair charging rather than just putting a monthly levy. And then SMS is a mechanism to detect fraudulent payments and fight against it. So banks obviously have to comply in various ways to these kind of regulations. So let's see what are the common mechanisms that banks can adopt, right? So simplistically, very simplistically, you have a core banking platform, and then you have payments being initiated, could be through any channel, let's pick a digital channel, and then you may have multiple telcos through which you want to send notifications. So your data is moving end to end, on one hand from the channel, going into the core banking systems, goes through various systems, various microservices, if you will, and then gets emitted out through mechanisms, either an MQ or a file mechanism or an API, out to the telcos, right? So simple point-to-point communication. But then this does not work with the scale that we are talking about. This does not work to allow us to leverage things like artificial intelligence or being cloud native, or the modern technologies kind of you can't leverage if you follow this architecture. So what are the possible challenges here, right? So first and foremost, you have tight coupling. If you wanted the same message to be going to another kind of a gateway, if you wanted the same message to go to another system, you can't, right? Anything with an MQ, IBM MQ, or pick your favorite product, you would need infrastructure on your side, you would need infrastructure on, oops. I think have I been timed out? Okay, I'll go fast. So there's a lot of coupling there, and then it's variety, so there is no standards here. So all of those things slow us down from a point-to-point communication perspective. Time to market is slow, implementing these APIs across is slow, and it's overall complexity, so which means cost, right? A worse problem happens when burst happens. So when a lot of these transactions come in, and again, income tax e-filing, classic example of that burst, a lot of these transactions come in quickly. What do you do? Because that burst is then spread through the system, and that leads to bad things. Systems crash, you might crash the telco might crash you, gateways crash. all kinds of bad things happen, and then messages are lost, right? So is there a different way that we can do things here, right? So what we are proposing, again, learning from FX or learning from any of those industries is, let's become real time, let's become more responsive from an application perspective, more cloud native, and more predictive. So use AI and machine learning mechanisms. In other words, let's architecturally think event driven, right? So what does that mean? You take that mothball, break it up into monoliths. Again, break the monolith up into microservices. It's a Gartner slide. I'm just using that. So now you have smaller pieces, and these smaller pieces are integrated with an event broker. And as a result of that, you can change one without impacting the rest of the ecosystem. In other words, you have your APIs just emit events. So you could have a risk, a fraud, a payment processor, an SMS notification service, all consume off the same payment event. Publish once, subscribe many times. So let's see how this is applied to our architecture here. So you create an underlying event mesh. You have your payment message that comes in, and now you use publish, subscribe. You use topics. Publish once, you use the event broker to distribute that data, and with that you get agility. With that you get better speed, you get faster time to market, right? Let's also see burst as a concept. So you're using open standards here, non-proprietary. AMQP is getting a lot of popularity, so is GMS. And when the burst comes in, the event mesh and the event broker have the ability to absorb your burst. So if the telco is slow, if your gateway is slow, your downstream systems are slow, you have this massive burst handling capacity. I mean, we could take the burst of Reliance Jio, or we take the burst of Airtel from a prepaid top-up perspective. That's essentially a capability that I think everybody in India needs, because India's scale is massive, right? Furthermore, it also does throttling, and it does replay. So if you have a system which went down, you can replay the data back and not lose anything, right? Then comes the question of AI, of machine learning, of cloud, like cool concepts. But again, if we put this in context of NPAs, right? So from an NPA perspective, if you were able to watch the patterns of every transaction, if every transaction, not just payment, every transaction that happened through the various channels of the bank could be streamed into some sort of an AI, some sort of a machine learning capability, would we be able to predict that, oh, when these kind of behaviors happen in 6 months or in 2 years, that account becomes stressed, right? Or maybe we should extend further credit to this kind of customer, because that is the trend that we've spotted. So using AI and machine learning concepts, and also using cloud as a cheap and innovative way to do it, that's what we are again talking about. You emitted an event from any system, could be a channel, could be a core banking system, over open standards in a publish, subscribe, streaming way, and that goes to various clouds. You could be doing Lambda in AWS, you could be doing BigQuery and TensorFlow in Google for machine learning. You're publishing once. So it's like wiretapping a transaction and sending it to various downstream systems, including what I call parasitic listeners who are doing interesting things. So bringing it all together, this is how it will come up. You publish an event once, and anybody who needs that event subscribes to that event. Could be a payment, could be a new account opening, could be a credit card authorization event, and more consumers come in, they just get a copy of it. So your applications become very agile and very performant from a burst handling capability standpoint, right? So let the animation go. Another standard that you can pay attention to is Async Api. So you might be using APIs, but APIs are generally request reply. Here is an API which is much more push oriented. So if you have to push any data to, let's say, another bank, or it could be an end consumer, a standardized way of doing that over protocols such as AMQP. Again, we are one of the sponsors. SAP, the logo here, is another sponsor. There are a bunch of other sponsors for this standard. So What the standard means, no vendor is basically locking you in, so you can pick and choose the vendors and change them when you like, right? And lastly, here's a case study. So this is what we're working with in China, in the UK as well, with a couple of banks, and in Thailand. So Platform Universe is a banking product built very much on open banking. So I was going to talk about how all of these concepts revolutionize open banking. Open banking is all about standards. It's about standardized APIs for banks to interact with the ecosystem, with each other, with the consumer. So having an event-driven approach, a standard-based approach, Platform Universe is an example where they have used it successfully, right? So with that, again, very quickly about Solace. By the way, Solace comes in as a hardware appliance. We also come in as a cloud solution, but it's free to start with. So for your first 1,000 TPS, 10,000 request reply, you can just download it. We don't even ask you for our email, Docker-based or cloud-based. Just go and use it. If you need capacity, then various support mechanisms are available. So from an experimentation perspective, we'll be very glad to work with you, or your development teams can just go and check this out at our website. Right? So with that, thanks a lot for your time, and look forward to interacting with you.